Next, Nicky Mchale is called to give evidence. Professor John Cooper, KC, will question him on behalf of the defence. Nicky Mchale is sworn in by the court usher. Mr. Cooper then asks him to stand up and ask his full name. Mr. Mchale tells the court his full name, his date of birth and his address. He says his address is Snowbury Road and he is 32 years old. John Cooper asks him to tell the court a little about himself. He also asks if he had any convictions prior to August 22nd. Nicky Mchale says he does not. He also confirms he was convicted for Class B cannabis after this date. What were the facts of that case? Asked John Cooper. Intent to supply, says Nicky Mchale. Nicky Mchale then goes on to confirm he received a 12-month suspended sentence after pleading guilty. This was a guilty confession to the possession of cannabis with the intent to supply. He also says drugs were seized and the amount was 8 bars of poly and 6 ounces of green. John Cooper asks, what's the approx value? Around 4,000, says Nicky Mchale. Nicky Mchale says he lived at the address on Snowbury Road with his granddad and grandma all of his life. He also says he has known Cashman all my life. Was it a close relationship? Asked John Cooper. Not at first, but over the past 2 or 3 years we've got really close, says Nicky Mchale. Did you socialise with him? Says John Cooper. Yeah, he'd just come round the house and have a chat. Just check on me because I've got mental health issues, says Nicky Mchale. Did there come a time when you wanted a change of scenery? Asked John Cooper. That was around 2021. I just lost my granddad. Prior to that, I lost my mum and my nan. I went to my cousin's, Michael's, says Nicky Mchale. Where did he live? Asked John Cooper. Lark Lane, says Nicky Mchale. Nicky Mchale then goes on to say he was there 3 to 4 months. Why did you move out? Asked John Cooper. I was getting homesick. I knew everyone in my area. Thomas Cashman was renting the house off me. He offered me to move back in, says Nicky Mchale. I moved back in around March 2022. The house had been done up, decorated from top to bottom, says Nicky Mchale. Who had arranged for that to be done? Asked John Cooper. Thomas Cashman, says Nicky Mchale. Where had he gone? Asked John Cooper. He'd found a place with his missus and the kids. I was struggling financially. He sold cannabis on a high level, so I asked is there any chance I could make any money? Can I start selling cannabis, basically? He wanted to store cannabis in my house. I fully agreed, says Nicky Mchale. Did Thomas Cashman pressure you into any of this? Asked John Cooper. Most definitely not. I approached him, says Nicky Mchale. What was the deal about this cannabis being supplied to you? Thomas Cashman would supply you with cannabis. What would you do with it? Asked John Cooper. I'd sell it in 20 bags, 50 bags, says Nicky Mchale. Would you pay immediately? Says John Cooper. Get now, pay later, says Nicky Mchale. Although Thomas Cashman had left your house, did he have a key? Says John Cooper. He did, yes, says Nicky Mchale. Did you say he could keep hold of it? Says John Cooper. I did, yes, says Nicky Mchale. You were aware Cashman dealt in cannabis at a high level? Are you aware how high? Says John Cooper. I know he earns quite a lot of money off it, says Nicky Mchale. Were you aware of the Knee family around August the 22nd or before? Asked John Cooper. Nicky Mchale replies and says, I know of the Knee family, yeah. How would you describe your position with them? Asked John Cooper. Just know them in the area, says Nicky Mchale. Did you ever see Thomas Cashman with any of the Knees? Says John Cooper. I did, yes, says Nicky Mchale. When was that? Says John Cooper. It was about 2 years ago in Snowbury, says Nicky Mchale. About 2021? Says John Cooper. Something like that, yes, says Nicky Mchale. It was in your home? Asked John Cooper. Yes, says Nicky Mchale. Were you there? Asked John Cooper. I was there, yes. Which member of the Nee family was Thomas Cashman with? Asked John Cooper. I'm not aware of him, but I think his name was Jason, says Nicky Mchale. In general, what was the atmosphere? Asked John Cooper. Just laughing and joking, having a spliff together, says Nicky Mchale. Any sense of bad blood or aggression or bad tempers? Says John Cooper. No, none at all, says Nicky Mchale. Mr. Cooper then goes on to ask Nicky Mchale to show what t-shirt he is wearing. So Nicky Mchale says he is wearing a Monterey t-shirt. He then lifts up his top to show the jury. John Cooper then asks, what do you have on your feet? A pair of cruffy trainers, says Nicky Mchale. He then takes one shoe off and shows it to the jury, but he remains behind a screen. Mr. Cooper asks, at that time, did you know Paul McCarthy? I've known Paul for about 7 years through his ex-girlfriend. I've known her all my life, says Nicky Mchale. Nicky Mchale goes on to say he's a big Liverpool supporter and that he watched a match at Liverpool v Manchester United on the evening of August the 22nd. John Cooper asks him, how do you feel after that result? Stressed, says Nicky Mchale. Did you watch the match? Asked John Cooper. I did, yes, says Nicky Mchale. Where did you watch the match? Asked John Cooper. Snowbury Road, says Nicky Mchale. I watched a game with Paul McCarthy and had one beer. Afterwards, we went to his front door and had a cigarette. The game finished about 10:15. I went to the door between 10:to and 5:to roughly, said Nicky Mchale. Where were you standing? Says John Cooper. At my front door, says Nicky Mchale. Nicky Mchale also says he saw someone after a couple of minutes. He says this person was Thomas Cashman. He also said he saw Craig Bryan. Craig went back into his house, says Nicky Mchale. What did Thomas Cashman do? Asked John Cooper. He stood in the garden smoking a spliff. What looked like the spliff, says Nicky Mchale. How far away was he? Asked John Cooper. I was in my garden. He was in Craig's garden, says Nicky Mchale. Now that bit of evidence is actually quite important to note. So remember he said he saw Thomas Cashman and Craig Bryan. He said Craig Bryan went back into his house. John Cooper asked him, what did Thomas Cashman do? And quoting Nicky Mchale's words, he says, he stood in the garden smoking a spliff, what looked like to be a spliff. So Mr. Mchale says Colin Howells was living in a caravan on Mr. Bryan's drive at the time. Nicky Mchale then says Colin Howells was living in a caravan on Mr. Bryan's drive at the time. Did Thomas Cashman seem stressed? Asked Mr. Cooper. No, says Nicky Mchale. What was his attitude about football? Asked John Cooper. He was not into football. He then says Thomas Cashman went back in. He said he spoke to Thomas Cashman for about 5 minutes. He said they spoke about how he was and the football. He says Cashman was laughing at him because he was stressed over the football. Nicky Mchale then says after he went inside he sat and watched the pundits to talk about the match after the game. He says I was sitting on my couch when I looked out. He'd gone back into Craig's. Did you see him go back into Craig's house? Asked John Cooper. No, says Nicky Mchale. When you looked out of your window, did you see Thomas Cashman at all? No, says Nicky Mchale. Justice Amanda Yip says, you sat down and watched the pundits talk about the match. When you looked out, he'd gone back into Craig's. I saw Tommy Cashman. He was still smoking his spliff. That's what you just said. Sorry, I got mixed up. I didn't see him. There was no one there when I looked out of the window, says Nicky Mchale. He also says Mr. Bryan then came out of his house about 5 to 10 minutes later. He asked could I drop him off somewhere with some money. I wasn't going to take him anywhere. I haven't got a licence, and I couldn't be bothered, says Nicky Mchale. Did Craig ask anyone else? Asked John Cooper. He turned to my friend and asked Paul McCarthy, said Nicky Mchale. He agreed. Did they leave? Asked John Cooper. Yes, says Nicky Mchale. You're alone now in your room, your front room, says John Cooper. Yeah, just watching the telly, says Nicky Mchale. He then says he looked out of his window around 5 minutes later. He saw Cashman in the front garden at Craig Bryan's. He said he was smoking another spliff. Are you sure it was him? Asked John Cooper. Positive, says Nicky Mchale. Did Paul McCarthy in due course return? Asked John Cooper. He did, yes, says Nicky Mchale. Did he come back into your house? Asked John Cooper. He did, yes. He just made me aware there was a lot of police presence in the area, says Nicky Mchale. Was there a discussion what this might be about? Asked John Cooper. I just said it's mad that. I wonder what that could be, says Nicky Mchale. Where was Craig? Asked John Cooper. Craig walked back over to his house. He came into mine for a few seconds, then went back home, says Nicky Mchale. Did you look outside after Craig left? Asked John Cooper. Yeah, the blinds were open. Cars were always going past. I'm always looking out, says Nicky Mchale. Did you see anyone outside? Asked John Cooper. No, says Nicky Mchale. Could you see Thomas Cashman? Asked John Cooper. At this time, no, says Nicky Mchale. What did you do? Asked John Cooper. I literally sat down, says Nicky Mchale. He also says Thomas Cashman later entered his house. He said it was around 20 to 30 minutes, roughly, after Craig Bryan had left. He said, we went back into the kitchen and done a spliff. He also says Thomas Cashman asked for a drink, but he had none in the fridge. Nicky Mchale says to this, I said I'll go to the shop if you want me to. I did, yeah. John Cooper then says there is CCTV of this witness in the shop getting drinks. There's no dispute. You go to a corner shop to get drinks. That's correct, says Nicky Mchale. What vehicle did you use? Says John Cooper. A Citroen Berlingo, says Nicky Mchale. Whose vehicle is that? Says John Cooper. Thomas Cashman's, says Nicky Mchale. He then says he went to a shop on Princess Drive to buy the drinks. What time does that shop close? Asked John Cooper. Roughly around 11 o'clock, says Nicky Mchale. Was it open? Asked John Cooper. It was when I got there, yes, says Nicky Mchale. Did you return home with several cans of Coke, Diet Coke, Cherry Coke? Asked John Cooper. Yeah, Tommy loves Coke, says Nicky Mchale. Where was Tommy Cashman? Asked John Cooper. In my house still, says Nicky Mchale. Did you open the drink and have it with him? Asked John Cooper. We had one each, yeah. We were literally talking about the football, even though he doesn't like it, says Nicky Mchale. Was there any mention of sirens? Asked John Cooper. There was, yeah. I said there's a lot of police about, and he said I know. He mentioned he didn't want to drive home, as there was a lot of police present, and he'd had a joint, says Nicky Mchale. Did he ask you for a lift? Asked John Cooper. That's correct. I said I didn't want to drop you off because of the police. I haven't got a licence, says Nicky Mchale. He then says he asked Mr. McCarthy to give Thomas Cashman a lift, and Mr. McCarthy did so. Nicky Mchale then says he did not see Thomas Cashman again that day. At this point, Mr. Cooper says he has no further questions, so that'll be the end of part 1.